Welcome back to the CCNA routing and switching video series brought to you by ABY Design and Tech. In this video, we are going to have a look at the function of a wireless LAN controller at a very high level overview. So we're not going to dive deep. This is just going to be the basics of what a wireless LAN controller does. So to start off with, let's have a look at the main function of a wireless LAN controller. Now, wireless LAN controller, or WLC, that's shorthand notation for wireless LAN controller, is usually used for larger wireless deployments. So we are looking at deployments of more than 10 access points. And a wireless LAN controller is only used in conjunction with what we call lightweight access points. So if you don't know the difference between lightweight access points and autonomous access points, please watch my previous video where I dive deep into the function of both types of access points and what they are used for. Now, autonomous APs, the other type of access points, they can function without a wireless LAN controller. So a wireless LAN controller is typically used for larger deployments because it provides a centralized location where we can manage and have oversight of all of the access points around our network. Now, for larger deployments such as airports and conference centers, that's a massive bonus. Airports would typically have more than, I would say on average, 40 to 50 access points. And if we would have to go and configure each access point independently, and if each access point acted as an independent device, that would cause massive administration issues. With a wireless LAN controller, we can configure all access points from a centralized location, pressure all configuration from a centralized location, and that wireless LAN controller has got overview of every single access point within our network, meaning that any alerts come from that centralized location. So if an access point goes down, the WLC will know about it, the wireless LAN controller will know about it, and it will alert us. So like I just said, the wireless LAN controller has oversight of all access points and will manage all access points. Now, the function of an autonomous AP. So autonomous AP, not only does an autonomous AP radiate or generate an RF signal, an autonomous AP will also bridge wired to wireless. The autonomous AP functionality is split between the lightweight access point and the wireless LAN controller. So, the lightweight access point is responsible for sending and receiving radio frequency signals, and the wireless LAN controller is responsible for the more advanced functions such as authentication, so authenticating clients, and also bridging the wired to wireless through layer 2 conversion. And this is a very important note. A lightweight access point cannot function at all without a wireless LAN controller. When a lightweight access point boots up, the first thing it does, it looks for a wireless LAN controller. If it can't find a wireless LAN controller, then it cycles power again. So it boots up, looks for a wireless LAN controller. I can't find one, I'm going to shut back down and then boot back up. Again, look for another wireless LAN controller. Until it has found a wireless LAN controller and downloaded its configuration, it cannot function. Again, a lightweight access point, it only generates an RF signal. So think of the split between wireless LAN controller and lightweight access point as being kind of a manager and a worker scenario. So the lightweight access points, they are going to be your workers. They are going to be the guys sending and receiving RF signals. Okay, receiving RF signals, receiving data from, let's say, wireless clients. But once it's received that data, it doesn't know what to actually do with it. It's like, okay, I've received this wireless data, this wireless signal. So I've received this data of a RF signal, of a wireless signal. I don't know what to do with it since I'm only supposed to send and receive RF signals. Now that I've received this data, I'm going to send this data over to my wireless LAN controller because he is the brain of the whole operation. He will know what to do with it. So then the lightweight access point will then forward this data over to the wireless LAN controller. The wireless LAN controller, so like I said in the previous video, is that when we communicate over wireless, we use a different protocol to actually communicate over wireless than what we do with wired. The wireless LAN controller, it's one of its primary responsibilities is to convert the information or the wireless information into wired information. So it's converting from 802.11 into Ethernet. Now the reason why it does that is because the wired clients, they have a Ethernet network interface card which only understands the Ethernet protocol. So think of it like this, like I mentioned before in previous videos, when devices are sending data, they just don't send that data as is. They have to information for the data to be able to get from point A to point B. Now with the wireless client, the information it adds to the data allows that data to go from itself to the lightweight access point. Once that data arrives at the wireless LAN controller, the wireless LAN controller needs to change the format of that information added to the data that the wireless client wants to send into a format to get that data from the wireless LAN controller to the switch and then to the wired client. So it has to change the format of that information so that when it sends that data to the switcher knows, okay, this data has come from this wireless client who I know to reach via my port going to the wireless LAN controller, and this data is going to the wired client. So this is an example of the wireless LAN controller in action. This example was actually shown in the previous video, but again, I'm including it here just to refresh your memory. So in this case, the wireless client Bob wants to communicate with Brad. In this case, Bob will send that data over to Brad. So that data will eventually get to Brad, sorry. But in this case, Bob's going to send this over to his wireless access point, which is radiating this RF signal. He knows, okay, I'm receiving this radio frequency signal, from this wireless access point. I know that if I want to communicate with anybody, either wirelessly or wired, I have to go through this guy. So the wireless access point receives this data, and he's like, okay, Bob wants to communicate with Brad. However, I'm only a basic device. I only understand RF signals. So I'm going to send this to my manager, who's a wireless LAN controller, who will know how to reach Brad. So the wireless LAN controller receives this data. And he realizes, okay, so Bob wants to speak to Brad. Now, as I'm the brain of the wireless network, I know how to reach Brad. I know how to convert this information, this layer 2 information, which is attached to this data, into a format that Brad understands. So he has source and destination MAC address. In this case, the source MAC address is going to be Bob's MAC address. Destination is going to be Brad's. Now, when he sends this data now to the switch is going to know, okay, this data is going to be destined for Brad because I can understand Ethernet information. And eventually, that data will arrive at Brad. Now, let's talk about the benefits of using a wireless LAN controller. First benefit is that it's very scalable. Again, because the wireless LAN controller has got oversight of all access points, all the configuration is done at the wireless LAN controller. So all configurations such as transmission power, what channels to use are configured at the wireless LAN controller. If you have 30, 40, 50, 60 different access points in your network, all that configuration can be done from a single location. Another benefit of using a wireless LAN controller is that we can automate a lot of the configuration such as transmission power and channel usage, as the APs will actually feed information back to the wireless LAN controller. Now, what does this mean? So Cisco access points have got the ability to actually communicate with the wireless LAN controller, communicate with each other. They feed information back to the wireless LAN controller, and then based on that information, the wireless LAN controller itself can make choices. It can make choices based on, okay, this is what channels I want these APs to use. As an example, it could say, okay, AP1, you can use channel 6, AP2, you can use channel 1, and AP3, you can use channel 11. It could then also automate settings such as transmission power. So essentially what happens is that these lightweight access points, they feed information back to the wireless LAN controller. Based on this information, the wireless LAN controller can say, okay, I want AP1 to transmit at, let's say, power 1, AP2 to transmit at power 3, AP3 to transmit at power 6. And because this is done through automatic process, this can change. So as an example, let's say we have 3 APs, they're all transmitting a certain power. So transmission power just refers to how much energy we use to generate the RF signal that is emitted from the access point. The higher the transmission power, the further the RF signal can travel. So in this case, let's say that level 1 is the lowest transmission power and level 10 is the highest transmission power. Let's say AP 1, 2, and 3 are all transmitting at, let's say, level 2. If AP2 goes down, the wireless LAN controller can actually sense that. It realizes, okay, I've lost my connection to access point 2, so that access point must be down. He cannot serve the wireless clients that he was previously serving. So in this case, I'm going to increase the transmission power of APs 1 and 3 to 5, so that they can cover for the coverage hole. Or cover for the previous area that AP2 was covering, and that way the clients that were using AP2 as their access point can now use APs 1 AP1 and 3, and there won't be any black hole in coverage. And another benefit of wireless LAN controllers is that they can automatically pick up issues such as interference and an AP going down, and they can automatically recover from these problems. So this alleviates a lot of the administration overhead for network engineers, because the wireless LAN controller can do all these things automatically, meaning there's no manual intervention, meaning that recovery can be automatic and can be very quick. Autonomous APs do not have this functionality, as they are a standalone device. So think of it like this: where's a wireless LAN controller and a low weight access point. The brain is in the wireless LAN controller. The functionality is in the access points. The access point is essentially a dumb device. They all have to communicate with the brain, which is the wireless LAN controller. Because the brain is in one centralized device, it's got overview of all the other devices around it, all these other access points. With a autonomous access point, the brain is local to the device. So in this case, each autonomous access point has its own brain, which means that because it has its own brain, it's only concerned about what's going on with that local device. If let's say we have AP1, 2, and 3. AP1, 2, and 3 are all autonomous APs. They're all concerned about with what's going on with themselves. If AP2 goes down, AP1 and 3 doesn't know about it, which means that they can't automatically adjust to cover for the area which AP2 was previously covering. So let's have a look at an example of this automatic recovery. So in this case, we have this client over here. It's receiving an RF signal from a nearby AP, so you can send and receive data over RF signals. You can communicate wirelessly. In this case, let's say this is AP2. AP2 goes down, so now we have a coverage black hole. A signal black hole or coverage black hole means that there's a certain part in our wireless network where there's no wireless coverage. The wireless LAN controller picks this up. He's like, oh, okay, AP2 has gone down. Now I know that there are two APs which are close to where AP2 is. Let me increase the power of those APs to cover for this black hole. So in this case, it increases the power of APs 1 and 3. Now they're covering the same area that AP2 was covering, and now this client can now receive an RF signal and can now again start communicating wirelessly over the wireless network. Now let's have a look at how a wireless LAN controller can actually control the transmission power of the APs. So in this case, AP1, 2, and 3 again. AP2, the wireless LAN controller knows, okay, for some reason AP2 is transmitting its RF signal at too much of a low power, which means that there are signal black holes. Again, signal black holes are certain parts in our environment, in our office, or let's say in the conference center, in the airport, where there's no wireless signal. Because there's no wireless signal, it means we cannot communicate on the wireless network. Now the wireless LAN controller in this scenario knows that AP2 transmitting at too much of a low power. So all it does is actually increase the transmission power of AP2. He's like, oh wait a minute, I can fix that. I will increase the transmission power of AP2 to cover the signal black holes. Now anywhere within our corporate environment, within our office environment, within our conference center environment, somebody will have a wireless signal. Someone can communicate wirelessly. So now that we've looked at what a wireless LAN controller does, let's dive a bit deeper and look at how does an AP communicate with the wireless LAN controller. So the access point, the lightweight access point, needs some way of communicating with the wireless LAN controller so that the wireless LAN controller knows about it. Now each AP in our network, they have to first discover the wireless LAN controller. Now there are many methods on how this discovery occurs. I won't dive into it now. Again, this is a topic for another video. Once we understand more about routing and switching, then we can start diving a bit deeper into how an AP discovers its wireless LAN controller. There are 4 methods. It can be broadcast message. If the wireless LAN controller resides in a different network, then we can use what we call a IP helper address, which is used for DHCP relay. It can be learned through a DHCP option, and that can be learned through a DNS lookup. So a DNS lookup is what resolves host names into IP addresses. Again, we'll dissect that in a different video. So once the AP has discovered its wireless LAN controller, it then establishes what's called a CAPWAP tunnel with the wireless LAN controller. So CAPWAP stands for Control and Provisioning of Wireless Access Points. Essentially, this is a tunnel between the AP and the wireless LAN controller. Now this tunnel serves 2 purposes. So the first purpose is to act as a keep alive between the access point and the wireless LAN controller. That tunnel is permanently established so that the AP can communicate with the wireless LAN controller, and so that the wireless LAN controller knows that the AP is still alive. If for whatever reason that tunnel goes down, the wireless LAN controller assumes that AP is dead, and if you have email notifications enabled on your wireless LAN controller solution, it will notify you via email or something. The other function is so that the access point can send data to the wireless LAN controller. So I know what you guys were thinking. You guys are thinking, okay, I know that the wireless LAN controller is responsible for bridging wireless to wired. However, how does the AP actually get that data in the wireless format over to the wireless LAN controller? Essentially, that data is going to be traveling over a Ethernet network, a switched network. So how do they get that data, which has the wireless information all added to it, to the wireless LAN controller, so the wireless LAN controller can take that information, convert it into an Ethernet format so that the wired devices can understand. It does this by sending that data through the cap-up tunnel all the way to the wireless LAN controller. Now, essentially, the cap-up tunnel, as the access point is sending the data through the cap-up tunnel, it's going to add some information to that data. Essentially, it's going to add cap-up information to that data, so that data only travels from the access point all the way to the wireless LAN controller. Once it's reached the wireless LAN controller, the wireless LAN controller is going to remove that cap-up information and essentially convert the wireless information added to the data to Ethernet information, so it can then send that data to the switch and to the correct wired device. So let's have a look at how this cap-up tunnel is established. So in this case, AP1, it has just booted up. He's like, okay, I've just booted up. I need to find a wireless LAN controller, otherwise I cannot perform my job at all. He's like, he starts searching for it. In the end, he finds one. He's like, okay, I found a wireless LAN controller. Let me establish a connection with a wireless LAN controller. So now it establishes a cap-up tunnel. He's like, okay, I've established a cap-up tunnel with my WLC. We can send and receive data back and forth. This performs two functions: acts as a keep alive, so that the wireless LAN controller knows that I'm alive and I'm working, and also allows me to report and send information and send data to the wireless LAN controller. Now that I've established this cap-up tunnel, let me now download my configuration from the wireless LAN controller, and I can now function as a lightweight access point. Now let's look at wireless LAN controller final details. So a wireless LAN controller can either come as a physical device, so essentially a box device, physical device that you actually plug, let's say, cables into physical hardware, or it can be a virtual appliance. A virtual appliance you would run on a virtual host. You'd run it in your VMware environment. It can also be added as a module, added onto a switch. And it could be a standalone device. So essentially, when you purchase a physical device like a wireless LAN controller, 2500 series wireless LAN controller, that would probably come as standard as a standalone device. 2504 is what I had when I was studying for my CCNA wireless. Essentially, a very small wireless LAN controller, perfect for a home lab. Or it could be a module which you add onto a switch. So adding additional functionality, additional wireless functionality, or onto an already physical device you have on site. And it's important to know that very large enterprises where we have hundreds if not thousands of access points are going to have more than one wireless LAN controller. Now you can have more than one wireless LAN controller. Typically you would have more than one wireless LAN controller for redundancy, so that if, let's say, your primary wireless LAN controller goes down, you can then have a switch over to the backup wireless LAN controller. So typically you would have more than one wireless LAN controller, because you have to remember, if your wireless LAN controller goes down, your APs cannot function at all. So it's very important to have redundancy there. And in very large enterprises, you may have one for each site. So if you've got 100 APs at each site, you may literally just have a wireless LAN controller for each site that you have. And to be fair, that's everything there is to it. So again, this wasn't a deep dive. This was just a high level overview of what a wireless LAN controller does, why it's needed, and the benefits of it. We're almost finished with our network devices section in terms of with the CCNA routing and switching. So We've covered switches, routers, wireless access points, firewalls, wireless LAN controllers. We're going to cover servers next, and then we're going to have a look at what these devices actually physically look like. So these videos have just been essentially telling you what the main functions of these devices are. We're going to have a look at servers next, and then after servers we are going to have a look at what these devices physically look like so you can identify them in the real world. Again, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, please subscribe to my channel. Please check out the rest of my playlist. I will try to upload quite often, so trying to upload every single week. And like I said before, please share this information, please share this this channel with other people so we can bring free high quality IT training to the masses. Thank you very much.